Welcome back, dear dreamers, to the world of Dreamosaurs. I'm your host, and tonight we embark on a very special journey. Instead of exploring distant epochs or contemplating extinction events, tonight we're spending an entire day with a living, breathing, thriving community of dinosaurs. We're going to follow a herd of Parasaurolophus, one of the most distinctive and fascinating dinosaurs ever to walk the earth, through every hour of their daily life. Before we settle in, I want you to find yourself in the most comfortable position possible. Perhaps you're already nestled under your covers, or perhaps you're still arranging yourself in your bed, finding just the right spot. Take your time. Once you're settled, I'd like you to take a deep breath. Breathe in slowly through your nose, feeling the air fill your lungs, and then exhale gently through your mouth. Let your shoulders relax as you do this. Release any tension you've been holding on to throughout your day. Now, breathe in once more, and as you exhale, imagine yourself transported backward through time. We're traveling 75 million years into the past, to the late Cretaceous period. Around us, the world is transforming into something ancient and alive, a world that existed long before humans ever walked the earth. The air is warmer than you might expect, filled with unfamiliar scents. The landscape begins to take shape around us, and soon we'll find ourselves in a place of remarkable beauty and complexity. The setting for our story is what is now Alberta, Canada, in the region around the Dinosaur Park Formation. But imagine this place 75 million years ago. The climate here is warm, warmer than modern Alberta by a considerable margin. The mean annual temperature hovers around 16 to 20 degrees Celsius, mild and pleasant, though with distinct wet and dry seasons. There are no great ice caps at the poles in this era, no snow blankets the high latitudes. Instead, the world is a greenhouse planet with higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we experience today. The landscape before us is a floodplain, a vast area of low-lying terrain periodically inundated by rivers and streams. These rivers don't flow directly to the modern Arctic or Atlantic, but rather to the Western Interior Seaway, a vast inland sea that bisects North America. This seaway extends from the Arctic in the north all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico in the south, dividing the continent into two land masses. Our location, in what paleontologists call Laramidia, is the western landmass, a relatively narrow strip of land running north and south, bounded by the seaway to the east and by the rising Rocky Mountains to the west. The vegetation of this floodplain is lush and diverse. Conifers dominate many areas, including relatives of modern pines and firs, though these ancient conifers have a structure somewhat different from their modern cousins. These conifers can reach considerable heights, some towering 90 feet or more above the forest floor. Scattered among the conifers are flowering plants, still relatively new to the world in evolutionary terms. Some of these early flowering plants have become quite diverse, though they haven't yet achieved the dominance they would gain in later eras. There are also ferns of various kinds, some of them tree ferns reaching 20 or 30 feet high. Horsetails, those ancient lineage plants that have survived from times before dinosaurs emerged, grow in wetter areas near water sources. The forest understory is thick and tangled, with low-growing shrubs and ferns creating a dense mat of vegetation close to the ground. In clearings where the canopy opens up, grasses have begun to establish themselves, though they're still not particularly common or dominant. It's this patchwork of vegetation, this mix of different plant types and different heights, that creates an environment rich in food resources for the herbivorous dinosaurs that inhabit it. Rivers wind through this landscape in lazy curves, their waters colored brown with suspended sediment. During the dry season, these rivers would shrink, becoming more manageable channels where animals could cross with relative ease. But we're arriving during the beginning of the wet season, when the rains are starting to fall more frequently. The rivers are swollen, their waters rising and beginning to lap at the banks. Some areas are already showing signs of flooding, with water spreading out across the floodplain, creating temporary marshes and swamps. The air is thick and humid, carrying the rich smell of growing vegetation and damp earth. Insects buzz and chirp, creating a constant background noise. Dragonflies skim across the water surfaces, their wings catching the sunlight in flashes of iridescent color. Mosquitoes and other biting insects are present, though in this era they're not quite as diverse or abundant as they would become in later times. This is the world into which we're descending, the stage upon which our drama will unfold. This is the home of Parasaurolophus and its herd. Before we can properly follow our herd through their day, we should understand the individuals who comprise it. Parasaurolophus is a hadrosaur, a member of that group of dinosaurs often called duck-billed dinosaurs because of their wide, flat bills that do indeed resemble those of modern ducks. The name Parasaurolophus means near-crested reptile, a name that reflects the dinosaur's most striking feature. It be an enormous hollow crest that extends backward from the skull, sometimes reaching a length of nearly 2 meters, or about 6.5 feet. This crest is not a solid structure like the horns of modern cattle. Rather, it's composed of hollow tubes of bone, a labyrinthine system of passages that wind their way through the crest, like the tunnels of an elaborate castle. These tubes are connected to the nasal passages, allowing air to be drawn in from the nostrils, routed up through the crest, and then breathed back out. Scientists believe that as air traveled through these tubes, the dinosaur could produce a wide range of sounds, from high-pitched honks to deep, resonant bellows. Each individual Parasaurolophus would have had a slightly different crest shape, and therefore each would have produced a somewhat unique sound, much as each person has a unique voice. The body of an adult Parasaurolophus is substantial and impressive. These dinosaurs could reach lengths of about 33 feet from snout to tail tip, or roughly the length of a large school bus. They stood about 16 feet tall when standing upright on their hind legs. When standing, their posture is somewhat variable. Sometimes they would rest on their hind legs alone, their long tail extending behind them, serving as a counterbalance. Other times, particularly when feeding on lower vegetation, they would shift into a quadrupedal stance, dropping down to all fours, their shorter forelimbs helping to support their weight as they browsed. Despite their impressive size, Parasaurolophus is not a particularly heavy animal by dinosaurian standards, weighing perhaps 3.5 tons at adulthood. To put this in perspective, a modern African elephant weighs about 6 tons, so an adult Parasaurolophus is roughly equivalent to a large elephant, though with a quite different body shape. The weight is distributed throughout a barrel-shaped body, with the torso being quite voluminous. This large torso is necessary because it houses an enormous digestive system. As an herbivore feeding on tough plants, Parasaurolophus needs a capacious gut, a lengthy intestinal tract where specialized microorganisms can break down the fibrous plant material and extract nutrients. The forelimbs are notably shorter than the hind limbs, giving Parasaurolophus an appearance that some might describe as front horse, back rhinoceros. The forelimbs end in hands that are relatively narrow, with fused fingers that create a pseudo-hoof structure. These forelimbs aren't particularly mobile or dexterous, unlike the grasping hands of theropod dinosaurs. Rather, they're specialized for walking and for helping to support weight. The hind limbs, by contrast, are powerful and muscular, with well-developed thigh bones and strong shin bones. These hind limbs are capable of propelling the dinosaur at considerable speed when necessary, and biomechanical studies suggest that Parasaurolophus could run at speeds of up to 20 miles per hour, which is quite respectable for an animal of such considerable size. The tail of Parasaurolophus is long and substantial, making up a significant portion of the animal's total length. This tail is not a simple whip, but rather a complex structure of bone and muscle, with over 80 vertebrae running through its length. The tail serves multiple purposes. It helps with balance when the animal's walking upright on its hind legs. It can be used as a visual display to communicate with other members of the herd, and it provides counterbalance when the animal is moving quickly or making sharp turns. The head, despite supporting that enormous crest, is proportionally small for an animal of such size. The brain is relatively large for a reptile, though not particularly large by mammalian standards. The eyes are positioned laterally on the sides of the skull, giving Parasaurolophus good peripheral vision, excellent for spotting predators approaching from the sides or rear. The sense of smell is well developed, with nasal passages that are relatively large and complex. But the most remarkable feature of the head after the crest is the mouth. The mouth of a Parasaurolophus is the mouth of a specialized herbivore, a plant processing machine of remarkable sophistication. The front of the mouth features a wide, flat bill covered in rough keratin, the same material that makes up human fingernails and bird beaks. This bill is perfect for cropping vegetation, for using a shearing action to clip plants close to the ground, or pluck leaves from branches. But the real marvel is behind this bill. Inside the mouth are the teeth, arranged in dental batteries, highly sophisticated structures that represent some of the most complex teeth ever evolved in any vertebrate. An adult Parasaurolophus can have over 1,400 teeth in its mouth at any given time, arranged in columns within the upper and lower jaws. These teeth are not individually loose, as are the teeth of most reptiles, but rather are held together by a network of ligaments, forming an integrated dental system. This system is not rigid, but dynamic, allowing slight movement and flexibility as the animal chews, somewhat like a suit of chain mail rather than a solid brick wall. The teeth themselves are diamond-shaped when viewed from above, and they have a complex internal structure composed of 6 different tissue types. This complexity is unique among vertebrates, found nowhere else in the natural world, either in modern animals or in extinct species. The different tissue types wear at different rates, which means that as the dinosaur chews, the teeth constantly maintain their sharpness. When a tooth in the front of the dental battery wears down completely, it doesn't fall out as happens in most reptiles. Instead, it's ground down to nothing, and the tooth behind it in the battery advances forward to take its place. In this way, Parasaurolophus could wear through all of its teeth in a mere 50 days, having to constantly generate new teeth to replace the worn ones. Over a lifetime, an individual Parasaurolophus might generate hundreds of thousands of replacement teeth. When Parasaurolophus chewed, it did so in a unique manner. Unlike modern herbivores like horses or cattle, which have jaws that move primarily up and down, Parasaurolophus could move its jaws in a much more complex fashion. The upper jaw could flex outward when the mouth was closed, and the lower jaw could slide back and forth. This complex jaw motion, combined with the sophisticated dental batteries, allowed the animal to grind plant material with remarkable efficiency. Now that we understand what a Parasaurolophus looks like, let's focus on the social structure within which they lived. Parasaurolophus was a highly social animal, living in large herds that could number over 50 individuals. These herds were not random aggregations, but were organized communities with complex social structures, dominance hierarchies, and distinct group dynamics. Within a Parasaurolophus herd, animals tended to associate with others of similar crest coloration. Scientists have observed that individuals with similar crest colors would preferentially stay near each other, forming what might be called cliques or subgroups within the larger herd. Some scientists hypothesize that these color-based associations might have been based on age or sex. For instance, adult males might have had more vivid crest coloration than females or juveniles, and more colorful males would have maintained higher dominant status within the group. The presence of distinct individuals with different colorations and the grouping patterns that resulted from these differences suggest a complex social recognition system. Each Parasaurolophus could visually identify other members of its herd, could recognize specific individuals, and could assess the status of others based on the color and perhaps the size of their crests. This level of social sophistication is quite remarkable and places Parasaurolophus among the more cognitively advanced dinosaurs. The herd was not simply a loose aggregation of individuals. Fossil evidence suggests that herds often moved together in coordinated fashion. When faced with danger, they moved as a unit, sometimes in patterns that might have been designed to confuse predators. Imagine a massive ball of 50 or more animals moving together, their bodies obscuring each other, making it difficult for a predator to single out any individual target. Within the herd, there was an expectation of cooperation and mutual assistance. When one member of the herd found a particularly rich source of food, it would call out to the others, using its crest to produce sounds that would summon herd mates to the location. This behavior, which might initially seem altruistic, actually served to maintain social bonds and ensured that feeding occurred as a group activity. Their strength in numbers, and feeding together in a herd, even if it means sharing the food with others, is safer than feeding alone and vulnerable. The herd also maintained social structures related to parenting and the care of young. Fossil evidence suggests that not only did Mother Parasaurolophus care for their young, but the extended herd participated in raising the offspring. This alloparenting, as it's called, where individuals other than the parents help care for young, is found in some modern social animals like elephants and wolves, but it was less common among dinosaurs than among mammals. That Parasaurolophus may have engaged in this behavior speaks to their advanced social cognition. The herd was led by dominant individuals, typically adult males with the most vivid crest coloration. These leaders would coordinate movement, decide when and where the herd would move to find food or water, and would defend the herd against threats. Some of these leaders were elderly individuals, past their prime as reproductively active animals, but still commanding respect due to their age and experience. Even disabled or injured members of the herd were sometimes given roles to play, with some serving as watchkeepers, positioned to monitor the landscape for approaching predators. Our story begins in the pre-dawn darkness. The herd of Parasaurolophus has spent the night resting in a sheltered area near a bend in the river. The animals are clustered somewhat loosely, not in a tight mass, but arranged in groups and subgroups, with dominant males positioned somewhat more centrally, and females and juveniles arranged around them. As the first light of dawn begins to illuminate the landscape, the animals start to stir. There is a period of gradual awakening. Individual animals begin to lift their heads, their eyes opening as they assess their surroundings. This vigilance is constant. Even at rest, there is danger. Predators lurk in this landscape, most notably Albertosaurus, a large theropod dinosaur that can reach lengths of 26 feet and can weigh up to 2 tons. Albertosaurus is a formidable hunter, equipped with powerful jaws, sharp teeth, and a body built for pursuit. However, Albertosaurus prefers to hunt during quieter times, taking advantage of surprise and individual prey when possible. A young Parasaurolophus, perhaps only 3 or 4 years old, is the first to truly rouse itself. This juvenile is already showing signs of crest development, though its crest is much smaller than that of an adult, perhaps only a foot or so in length, compared to the 6-foot crests of the oldest adults. This young individual stretches, extending its hind legs and its forelimbs, the motions similar to the stretching movements of modern animals. Its mother, positioned nearby, watches with what we might interpret as maternal concern. She's a medium-sized adult, her crest colored a pleasing shade of reddish-brown. As the sun continues to climb above the horizon, more individuals rouse. There's a series of low sounds, honks and bellows produced through the crests, a form of communication that's partially a good morning greeting and partially information exchange. The larger, more dominant males produce deeper, more resonant sounds, while females and juveniles produce higher-pitched vocalizations. These sounds serve to reassure herd members that all is well, to reinforce social bonds, and to orient individuals spatially within the herd. The landscape is gradually coming into focus. The sun, now somewhat higher, bathes the ancient forest in golden light. The air is still cool from the night, though it will warm considerably as the day progresses. Insects begin their morning chorus, particularly the chirping of various cricket-like creatures, insects that existed in the Cretaceous just as they do today. Birds, those living descendants of theropod dinosaurs, begin to sing from the canopy of the conifers above. A large adult male, recognizable by his vivid crest coloration, a brilliant red-orange that catches the light, stands and begins walking toward a nearby stream. The water is cool and clear, despite the sediment that will clog it more heavily during the height of flooding season. This male is what we might call a patriarch of the herd, a leader who has survived many seasons and earned his status through dominance displays, size, and the undeniable authority that comes from experience. As this leader begins to drink, he monitors the water's edge carefully, aware that predators sometimes wait near water sources, knowing that prey animals must come to drink. But finding nothing amiss, he allows himself to drink deeply, his throat working as he draws in the water. Other members of the herd, emboldened by his assessment that the water is safe, begin to approach. Mothers bring their young to drink, protecting them from the more aggressive members of the herd. The younger juveniles splash slightly in the shallow water, showing a playful behavior that seems surprisingly joyful for creatures living in a dangerous world. After the herd has drunk its fill, attention turns to the primary activity that will occupy most of the herd's time today: foraging. Parasaurolophus, like all herbivores, must spend a tremendous amount of time consuming food. The plant material that comprises their diet is not particularly nutrient dense. Unlike meat, which is quickly digested and provides readily available energy and protein, plants require extensive processing and long digestive times to extract their nutritional value. The morning's foraging strategy takes the herd toward an area where the forest opens up into more of an understory meadow, a place where lower growing vegetation is more abundant. The older juveniles lead the way, not by any formal command, but simply by their natural movements within the social structure of the herd. The mothers and their young follow, with the dominant males positioned to defend against any potential threats. The vegetation here is a mix of types. There are ferns, particularly tree ferns about 20 feet tall, with fronds that are being examined by several Parasaurolophus simultaneously. A juvenile extends its neck upward, stretching to reach fronds that are above its head. Its mother comes beside it and, using her longer neck and the advantage of her greater height, reaches even higher, pulling down branches of conifer foliage that the juvenile can now access. But most of the foraging is concentrated on lower growing vegetation. The Parasaurolophus walk through the understory, their bills working to crop plants at ground level. The horsetails that grow along the stream banks are particularly prized, and several animals make a concerted effort to move toward these patches. Horsetails are abrasive plants, containing small particles of silica, but they are also rich in starch and other nutrients. The wear patterns on fossilized Parasaurolophus teeth suggest that horsetails, along with other tough, low-growing plants, were a major component of their diet. As the animals feed, there's a constant stream of quiet communication, An animal finding a particularly rich patch of ferns will produce a specific call, and herd members nearby will move in that direction. This isn't dramatic or energetic communication, but rather a sort of peaceful murmuring, a constant low-level exchange of information. The herd, while spread out across the meadow in a space covering perhaps 100 yards in all directions, remains unified through these vocalizations and through the constant awareness that each animal maintains of its neighbors. One adult female, past her reproductive years, serves in a special role this morning. She's positioned somewhat on the periphery of the herd, standing upright on her hind legs in what paleontologists call a tripod stance, using her tail as a third point of support to achieve height and stability. From this vantage point, she can see across the landscape, monitoring for potential danger. This elderly individual has lost some of her hearing and sense of smell in her advanced age, but her eyesight remains sharp, and her experience in watching for danger makes her invaluable to the herd. Her elevated position gives her a much broader field of view than animals feeding at ground level. As the morning progresses, the sun climbs higher and the temperature rises. By late morning, it's warming up quite a bit. The Parasaurolophus are working steadily through the vegetation, consuming enormous quantities of plant material. At this point in the day, the herd has probably consumed plant material totaling several 100 pounds. Yet the animals are not yet at capacity. The sheer volume of food required to sustain animals of this size means that eating is an almost constant activity. As the sun reaches its highest point and the heat of the day becomes most intense, the herd's activity begins to shift. The animals move into a more shaded area where the tall conifers provide relief from the direct sun. This is partially about seeking comfort, cooling off, but it's also tactically sound. In the dappled shade of the forest, the herd members are somewhat harder to see for potential predators. It's during the midday lull that the watchfulness must never completely relax. Predators are always a threat, but the herd's vigilance is particularly acute during the times when the animals are less mobile, less focused on coordinated movement. A young adult male, not yet a full leader but showing signs that he might achieve dominance in future years, is positioned at a slight elevation relative to the rest of the herd. He's alert, his eyes scanning the landscape. Off in the distance, perhaps a quarter-mile away, there's movement. The sound of something large moving through the underbrush reaches the herd. The watchful male immediately produces a low, urgent call, not quite a full alarm, but a warning signal that puts the entire herd on heightened alert. The animals stop their feeding, their attention shifting from vegetation to the perceived threat. The movement continues, and soon a shape emerges from the undergrowth. It's an Albertosaurus, a large predator, perhaps 20 feet long, and weighing nearly 1.5 tons. This is a mature individual, a female who has successfully hunted many times before. She's moving through the landscape, not directly toward the herd, but moving in a way that suggests she's aware of their presence. The lead male of the herd, the one with the brilliant red-orange crest, immediately shifts position. He moves forward slightly, placing himself more prominently in the predator's field of view. This is a classic prey animal strategy, used by modern herbivores and apparently also by dinosaurs. By presenting himself, by making his presence and size known to the predator, he communicates to the Albertosaurus that this is not an easy meal. The herd is cohesive, large, and alert. The predator would be taking a significant risk attacking such a large group. The Albertosaurus pauses in her approach. Her predatory instincts are telling her to pursue, but her hunting experience is telling her that a herd of Parasaurolophus in a defensive posture is not a safe target. She can clearly see the juveniles and some of the smaller or younger individuals in the herd, but to reach them, she would have to get through the protective mass of larger adults. The lead male produces a loud bellow, a sound that reverberates through the forest, a sound produced from deep within the chambers of his crest, deep and resonant and unmistakably a warning. After a tense moment that probably lasts no more than a minute or two, but which feels much longer to any observer, the Albertosaurus makes a decision. She's looking for weaker prey, a lone individual, a straggler, something without the protection of a herd. The Parasaurolophus herd is demonstrating through their coordinated response that they're not an easy target. The predator turns and moves off, disappearing back into the undergrowth in a different direction. The herd remains tense for several minutes after the predator departs. The watchkeepers maintain their vigil, and fewer animals are willing to return immediately to feeding. Instead, there's a period where the herd regroups somewhat, moving closer together, reasserting the bonds and proximity that make them safer. The cows and their calves cluster around the protective males, and there are frequent vocalizations as individuals reassure each other that the danger has passed. This interaction with a predator, while not resulting in injury or death to any member of the herd, is nevertheless a significant event in the lives of these creatures. It reinforces the value of herd living, of group cooperation, of the safety that comes in numbers. A lone Parasaurolophus, separated from the herd, would be vulnerable to an attack by a predator. That animal would likely not survive an encounter with a hungry Albertosaurus. But together, coordinated and alert, the herd can face down even these formidable predators. As the afternoon progresses and the initial tension from the predator encounter fades, the herd gradually returns to more normal activity. The immediate threat has passed, but the memory of danger will remain in the minds of these animals, a constant reminder of the precarious balance between predator and prey that characterizes life in the late Cretaceous. The herd moves to a new foraging area, a location where recent flooding has exposed soil and created conditions favorable for certain plants. There's a cooperative element to this movement, with some individuals leading the way and others following. The juveniles stay close to their mothers, learning through experience which areas contain good food and which areas should be avoided. It's during this afternoon foraging period that we observe more social interactions that go beyond simple feeding and survival. A young male, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, approaches another young individual and engages in what appears to be playful behavior. The two juveniles stand almost upright, their bodies close together, and gently bump their chests and crests together, producing quiet, honking sounds. This behavior is similar to what researchers have observed in modern mammals during play, particularly among juveniles that will one day compete for dominance. An adult female, not the mother of either of these juveniles, but perhaps an older sister or an auntie, watches this play with what we might interpret as amusement. These social interactions serve important functions beyond a simple enjoyment. The play allows the juveniles to learn coordination, to test their strength in a safe context, to establish social relationships, and to practice behaviors that will be important in adulthood, including the dominance displays and physical competitions that will determine their place in the herd hierarchy. Elsewhere within the herd, the older adults are engaged in more serious business. Two adult males, both with substantial crests, though not quite matching the brilliance of the primary leader, position themselves in facing configurations about 20 feet apart. They produce low, rumbling calls, testing their voices using their crests to produce acoustic displays. These displays are part of a dominance negotiation. Neither male is ready to commit to a full fight, a physical confrontation that could result in injury to both parties. Instead, they're engaging in what scientists call a dominance display, a means of resolving status questions without resorting to actual violence. The intensity of their vocalizations increases, with each male trying to outdo the other in producing deeper, more resonant sounds from his crest. The herd members around them largely ignore this display, having seen such interactions many times before. Finally, one of the two males makes a subtle shift in posture, a slight lowering of his crest, a signal that he's accepting a slightly subordinate position relative to the other. The second male accepts this acknowledgement with a few final vocalizations that are somewhat less intense than before, and the display ends peacefully. The two individuals remain in the herd, neither bearing significant injury, but their relative positions within the hierarchy have been reinforced or slightly adjusted. A mother with a very young juvenile, one that still appears to be in its first or second year, allows other members of the herd to approach and examine her offspring. This is an important social function, allowing the young animal to become acclimated to multiple adults, and allowing the herd community to collectively acknowledge the presence of a new generation. The young one, naturally curious, extends its small crest and produces high-pitched honks, its vocalizations still high-pitched because of its smaller size and not yet fully developed crest structures. As afternoon transitions toward evening, we have an opportunity to more carefully observe one of the most distinctive features of Parasaurolophus, the crest. Throughout the day, we've mentioned that these animals produce sounds through their crests, but the full complexity of this system deserves deeper attention. The crest is, in essence, a trombone-like structure. Air from the lungs is drawn through the trachea and then up through the nasal passages. Instead of being immediately exhaled, the air is routed through the hollow tubes within the crest. These tubes wind back and forth, creating a complex pathway through the crest structure. The air passes through these tubes, vibrating the tissue of the crest as it does so, and the vibrations produce sound. Because different tubes within the crest are of different lengths and have different shapes, they produce different frequencies. Males typically produce lower frequencies than females, and different species of hadrosaurs produce distinctly different sounds. The crest of Parasaurolophus walkeri produces sounds quite different from those of Parasaurolophus tubiton, and both differ from other hadrosaur species. An adult male produces a bellow that resonates through the forest. This sound serves multiple purposes. It declares his presence to other herd members, reinforcing his status and his location within the herd's spatial structure. It's a form of long-distance communication that allows individuals to remain aware of each other even when separated by vegetation or distance. For a male in his reproductive prime, the sound is also a mating call, an advertisement of his fitness and status to females in the herd and potentially to females in neighboring herds. A female produces a series of calls in response. Her crest, smaller than the male's, produces higher-pitched sounds. Scientists hypothesize that these higher frequencies might be easier for the herd to localize in three-dimensional space, making it easier for individuals to navigate relative to each other. Different females produce distinctly different calls, suggesting that each individual has a unique voice, a vocal signature that allows other herd members to identify them specifically. The juvenile produces a series of chirping sounds, his still developing crest not yet capable of producing the full range of sounds that adult crests can produce. These juvenile sounds seem to serve as both communication and as practice, allowing the young animal to develop the control and timing necessary to produce more sophisticated sounds as he matures. Scientists who have studied the acoustics of these crests estimate that an adult Parasaurolophus could produce frequencies ranging from about 48 to 240 hertz, with different individuals specializing in different frequency ranges. A modern trombone, the instrument most similar to these crests, produces frequencies in roughly the same range. The sounds would have varied from high-pitched honks to deep foghorn-like bellows, all capable of being heard over considerable distances through the forest. What's particularly fascinating about these crests is that they might have served multiple functions simultaneously. The sounds were clearly used for communication and for displays related to dominance and mating, but the crest might also have played a role in thermoregulation, in cooling the animal down on hot days as air passed through the passages. Some researchers have even suggested that the crest could have been used for detecting smells more effectively, with the passages in the crest providing increased surface area for olfactory epithelium. And, of course, the crest was also a visual display structure, with its size, color, and shape conveying information about the individual's identity, age, sex, and status. As the afternoon wears on and the heat of the day begins to diminish, the herd makes a decision that will commit them to traveling. The primary leader produces a series of calls that are noticeably different in character from the vocalizations heard earlier in the day. These seem to be what we might call movement commands, communications that signal the herd's intention to relocate. The herd begins to gather itself, the scattered individuals coalescing into a more compact formation. The juveniles are brought into the more protected central areas of the herd, surrounded by protective adults. The males position themselves more prominently on the periphery, ready to defend against any threats that might arise during the journey. The destination is a location where the herd has migrated to seasonally for many generations, a place where fossil evidence suggests herds of Parasaurolophus congregated. This migratory pattern is not unique to Parasaurolophus. Many modern herbivores migrate seasonally in search of better grazing or browsing grounds. The herd is moving toward what promises to be a particularly rich feeding area, a region where recent flooding has created conditions favorable for the growth of the horsetails and other nutritious plants that the Parasaurolophus prefer. The journey is not particularly rapid. The herd moves at a steady walk, maintaining an organizational structure that keeps the vulnerable individuals protected and allows coordinated movement. The path takes them along the river valley, following a natural corridor through the landscape. The animals have taken this route before, and they seem to follow it with the confidence of familiarity. As they move, predators are always a consideration. The landscape here is open enough that there's some visibility, but there are also patches of dense vegetation where a predator could hide. The watchers maintain their vigilance, and several of the more alert individuals position themselves at slightly elevated spots, scanning the terrain ahead and behind. The journey continues for perhaps an hour, covering a distance of several miles. During this time, the herd maintains its cohesion and organizational structure. No animal becomes separated. The vulnerable members remain protected in the middle. And finally, as the afternoon is transitioning toward evening, the herd reaches its destination. The location where the herd has arrived is special. This is a seasonal nesting ground, a place where Parasaurolophus herds return year after year to lay their eggs and rear their young. The landscape here is somewhat flatter than the river valley they've left behind, with fewer tall trees and more open areas. The soil is sandy and has a particular texture that makes it ideal for digging nests. But today, the nesting grounds are not yet full. The herd has arrived before the peak of the breeding season. Still, there are signs of activity. In several locations, mounds of soil about 7 feet wide and 3 feet deep are visible, some freshly constructed, others old and weathered from previous seasons. These are the nests, built by the females to house their eggs. The lead male produces a series of calls that alert the herd to the importance of this location. Females in the herd begin to disperse somewhat, moving to different areas within the nesting grounds, apparently assessing potential nest-building sites. The males respond by engaging in more frequent dominance displays, their crests producing increasingly intense vocalizations as they establish territories and hierarchies related to mating privileges. For the juveniles, the arrival at the nesting grounds signals something important as well. This is where they were born, approximately 1 year ago. Fossil evidence suggests that young Parasaurolophus hatch without fully developed crests, emerging from their eggs as tiny creatures, perhaps only 20 inches long, weighing just a few pounds. These hatchlings would have been altricial, meaning they required extensive parental care and feeding. Unlike some dinosaurs that could fend for themselves immediately upon hatching, Parasaurolophus young needed their parents to bring them food, to protect them from predators, to teach them how to survive. The young would have grown rapidly. Evidence from animals like Maiasaura shows that young hadrosaurs reached about 3 meters in length after 1 year, which translates to roughly 10 feet long by their first birthday. So the juveniles we've been observing throughout this day, though still much smaller than the full-grown adults, have already undergone remarkable growth. They've quintupled or more in length during their first year of life. As the herd settles into the nesting grounds, there's a sense of homecoming. The landscape is familiar to many of these animals. The smell is right. The food sources nearby are those they remember from previous years. And for the females approaching egg-laying, there's a biological imperatives driving them to be in this place. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the herd's activity begins to slow. The intensity of the dominance displays among males decreases. The juveniles, exhausted from their day of travel, begin to rest. Mothers gather their young close, positioning themselves to provide protection as the night approaches. The evening foraging is calmer, more relaxed than the morning feeding. The animals crop vegetation with less urgency, less competitive energy. There's a sense of contentment, of having survived another day successfully. The watchkeepers remain alert, but there's less overt tension now. The day's predator encounter is in the past, and for the moment the herd feels secure. As the light fades, the temperature begins to drop. The climate of 75 million years ago means that the nights are not cold, certainly not by modern standards, but there is a discernible cooling. The animals position themselves for maximum comfort, some standing, some lying down, some leaning against each other for warmth and companionship. The acoustic environment changes with the coming of night. The insect chorus changes character, with different species becoming more active. The birds that were calling during the day fall quiet, or their calls become muted. Some of the nocturnal animals begin to emerge. Small mammals, living in the shadows and crevices of this world, venture out to forage. Pterosaurs, those flying reptiles that still share the skies with birds, return to their roosts, and the Parasaurolophus herd settles in for the night. There's a final round of vocalizations, quieter than before, a sort of evening chorus that serves to maintain social bonding and to establish the positions of all herd members. This ensures that if danger comes during the night, the animals will know where each other are. The crest calls, which have echoed through the forest all day, fade into a gentle murmur. The lead male, the patriarch, with his brilliant red-orange crest, positions himself in a slightly elevated location. From here, he can monitor the herd's resting forms. He doesn't sleep as deeply as some of the others, his hypervigilance never completely shutting down. Even in rest, he remains partially alert, ready to respond to any threat that might present itself. What we've witnessed in this day in the life of a Parasaurolophus herd illuminates something fundamental about how these animals lived. Herding was not incidental to their biology and behavior. It was central to their survival strategy. A lone Parasaurolophus separated from the herd, would be enormously vulnerable. The advantages of herding are many. First, there's the simple geometric advantage: more eyes watching for danger. With 50 or more individuals in the herd, each individual benefits from the vigilance of dozens of other animals. A predator approaching from any direction is likely to be spotted by at least one herd member. The discovery of danger by any individual is communicated to all through the vocalizations that we've heard throughout this day. Second, there's the psychological advantage of the herd itself. Even if a predator like Albertosaurus chooses to attack, attacking a large, coordinated group is far more dangerous than attacking a lone individual. The herd can flee as a unit, creating confusion for the predator. Predators must often choose targets they can isolate from the group. The herd structure itself acts as a defense. Third, there are social advantages. Herding brings individuals together for mating, which is essential for reproduction. It allows for the teaching of young animals by parents and other adults. The transmission of knowledge about where to find good feeding areas, where the nesting grounds are, what routes to take during migration. These are all facilitated by the herding structure. An individual learning from the entire community benefits from the accumulated knowledge of many lifetimes. Fourth, there are developmental advantages specific to young animals. Juveniles growing up in a herd benefit from protection, from access to food discoveries made by adults, from the ability to learn through observation and association with both parents and peer individuals of similar age. The social development of young Parasaurolophus probably involved play with other juveniles, establishing social hierarchies that would shape their roles in the adult herd. To truly understand a day in the life of these dinosaurs, we must also think about their role in the broader ecosystem of 75 million years ago. Parasaurolophus was not alone in this landscape. They shared it with numerous other creatures, both dinosaurian and otherwise. Other herbivorous dinosaurs were present as well. Creatures like the ornithomimosaurs, rativates, and struthiomimus shared the landscape with Parasaurolophus, along with other hadrosaurs like Edmontosaurus, which might sometimes overlap in habitat and food preferences. While not exactly competing, these different herbivores would have utilized slightly different food sources, or fed at different times or in different locations, a pattern called resource partitioning that allows multiple similar species to coexist. The predators in this ecosystem were formidable. The Tyrannosaur gorgosaurus was the biggest predator of Parasaurolophus, a creature somewhat smaller than the famous Tyrannosaurus rex, but still a formidable hunter. There were also smaller predators like the raptors Dromaeosaurus and Sauronetholestes that would have hunted the eggs and babies of Parasaurolophus, along with the troodontid Stenonychosaurus, which would have also been a pest to the young and eggs. The plants that the Parasaurolophus consumed were themselves changing. Flowering plants, angiosperms, arose close to the beginning of the Cretaceous and became more abundant as the period progressed. This means that the Parasaurolophus of 75 million years ago were eating a mix of conifers, ferns, cycads, and an increasingly diverse array of flowering plants and shrubs. The world was gradually becoming a more green, more vegetated place, and the herbivores that fed in this world were adapting to the diversity this offered. What we've observed with Parasaurolophus was not unique. The fossil record gives us evidence that many Cretaceous dinosaurs were social, herding animals. Fossil bone beds, accumulations of bones from multiple individuals, often represent herds of dinosaurs that died together or were preserved together. The remains of young hadrosaurs are actually somewhat common in places like the Dinosaur Park Formation, with an experienced collector potentially discovering multiple juvenile hadrosaur specimens in a single day. The very abundance of young fossils found together suggests that these animals were living and dying in groups. The nesting behavior we've described, where herds return to traditional nesting grounds year after year, is also supported by fossil evidence. A 2001 review of hadrosaur eggshell and hatchling material from Alberta's Dinosaur Park Formation concluded that hadrosaurs nested in both the ancient upland and lowlands of the formation's depositional environment, suggesting that different hadrosaur species or populations may have preferred different nesting areas, much as different populations of migratory birds today return to traditional breeding grounds. The presence of both eggshells and bones of young animals in fossil deposits provides evidence for extended parental care. The fact that young animals often died at the nesting grounds, and that their remains are sometimes found with adult remains, suggests that parents remained with their young for extended periods, caring for them until they could fend for themselves. As we draw our day to a close, as the night deepens around the resting herd of Parasaurolophus, it's worth reflecting on what this day has revealed. We've witnessed not primitive, simple creatures, but rather animals with complex social lives, sophisticated communication systems, defined hierarchies and roles, territorial behaviors, mating displays, parental care, and herd coordination. The herd we've followed isn't merely a collection of individuals that happen to be in the same place. It's a community with structure, with purpose, with meaning in the daily interactions that constitute life. The beauty of a herd is that it demonstrates that even creatures from such a distant time, even creatures so different from us in so many ways, share with us some fundamental aspects of social life. The sounds of the crest calls echoing through the Cretaceous forest were language of a sort, though not language as we know it. They were information transfers, emotional expressions, status declarations, and maternal reassurances. They bound the herd together as much as physical proximity did. The dominance displays that males engaged in were rituals, important choreography that structured the herd society without requiring violence. Conflicts were resolved through displays and vocalizations, rather than through lethal combat, a pattern we see in many modern social animals as well. The protection of young by multiple adults, the teaching of survival skills through observation and example, the transmission of knowledge about preferred feeding areas and the location of nesting grounds. These are the behaviors that make the difference between a casual aggregation and a genuine society. And now, dear listeners, as the night deepens around our Parasaurolophus herd, as the stars emerge in the ancient sky, I'd like you to imagine yourself settling down alongside this peaceful community. Feel the cool night air, smell the vegetation and the damp earth. Hear the gentle murmurs of the dinosaurs as they rest, the quiet forest sounds of that distant time. You are safe here, surrounded by the herd, protected by these massive but gentle herbivores. The juveniles rest near their mothers, their tiny forms dwarfed by the adults, but secure in the knowledge that they are cared for and protected. The watchkeepers stand alert, as always, but their vigilance brings you peace rather than concern. You are part of this herd, accepted and sheltered. As you drift towards sleep, let yourself imagine the deep time that this scene represents. 75 million years, an incomprehensibly vast stretch of time, separates us from this moment. Yet for a day we've walked in the footsteps of these creatures, understood something of what their lives were like, appreciated the complexity and beauty of their societies. The dinosaurs survived for 160 million years. They were successful beyond any modern standard, diverse, adaptable, and often highly social. This day we've shared with a Parasaurolophus herd is just one moment in that vast story, one snapshot of the lives they lived day after day across the seasons and years. And now, with the herd settling into sleep, let yourself follow them into rest. Feel your breathing slow and deepen. Feel your body relax into the comfortable spot where you rest. Let the gentle honks and calls of the dinosaurs fade into the background as sleep claims you. You've had a full day, traveling with the Parasaurolophus, from dawn through dusk, experiencing their world of feeding and danger and social interaction and the simple daily activities that made up their lives. You've learned that despite being alien in so many ways, these creatures understood friendship and family, hierarchy and cooperation, vulnerability and strength. Thank you for spending this day with us at Dreamosaurs, for walking with the Parasaurolophus herd, for understanding something of their remarkable lives. If you enjoyed following this day in the life of dinosaurs, please like this video and subscribe to Dreamosaurs for more immersive journeys into prehistoric times. There are so many more days to witness, so many more creatures to meet, so many more ancient worlds to explore. Until next time, sleep deeply and dream of herds of dinosaurs moving through ancient forests, of crests that call out through the Cretaceous, of the simple beauty of creatures living together in community, under skies that have long since changed beyond recognition. Good night, dear dreamers. May you rest as peacefully as these Parasaurolophus, surrounded by those who care for you, safe in the shelter of your own herds and communities. The world is a better place when we remember that we too are social creatures, creatures who thrive in community, just as these dinosaurs did. Good night, and may tomorrow bring you as much beauty and adventure as this day brought to the herd we've followed. Sleep well.